Good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. People are still joining on the session, but it slowed down just a little bit. My name is Terry Hecker. I'm the Wellness and Benefits Consultant for the Medical College, and I appreciate your time and effort to attend our May Retirement Series sessions. We had 6 of them throughout this month. This is our last one. The month has flown by with how busy we've been with these and other stuff, but we appreciate your attendance. Today I have Celeste Miller with us from our retirement plan 403B area. She's our retirement benefits consultant. And then also today you're familiar with our guest speaker. He's done a lot for us this month and throughout the year. Tim Shirk, he works for Francis Investment Counsel. And I'm going to let Tim can share his background a little bit with you in case you don't know that. But we're talking about long-term care today. So this is the last in our session. And I will turn it over to Tim. So give me just a second here. We should be set. Take it away, Tim.
Here it's got our logos and it's got a nice looking couple in the middle. Are you seeing that? All right, very good. Thank you everybody for your time and attention. My name is Tim Shirk. I am a money advisor with Francis Investment Counsel. What that means is I spend most days talking with people about how to save for, how to plan for retirement, but also talk through other financial things in their lives. My background, since Terry mentioned it, is as an aircraft mechanic and a flight instructor, and that is where I learned how hard it can be to do some of this financial planning stuff when you're an expert at something else. And all of you are expert in each of the things that you do. That might not make you an expert in financial planning, so appreciate the opportunity to come in and help you out. In this case, the time in the aviation industry kind of led me into getting into the financial world so that I can help folks who are like I was, expert at something else, but not expert at finances. I've been doing this now for about 16 years. So day after day, I swim in mutual funds and investments and retirement plan savings, and dabble a little bit in taxes, though I'm not a tax advisor, and a little bit of estate planning, though I'm not a estate planner. Today's topic, all about long-term care insurance. This presentation is a result of a lot of research. It is not a result of a lot of experience, and that's important. The reason that's important is if you do want to ask a question, I'm happy to answer them. I think Terry will be watching the question and answer box. So if you want to type in questions during this presentation, please feel free to do so. This time, though, I am definitely reserving the right to say, I don't know, but I'm going to go find out. I'll give that answer to Terry and she can forward it to you. All right. So think of this as, first and foremost, a needs awareness kind of thing. So what do you need to know about long-term care? And then the second thing, I'm hoping there's 3 or 4 things that you'll take out of here when you're starting to look for or consider long-term care that will be very helpful. And I'll try to highlight some of those as I go. I will mention timothy.shirk@francisinvco.com is my email address if you want to send me an email if you have a question about something I said today. Otherwise, email Terry and she will forward the question on to me and we'll get you an answer. Now, when we think about long-term care, most of the people I meet with, they don't know anything specific about long-term care insurance except to say they've heard it's good to have, but that it's also expensive. And so the question is, do I need it and should I buy it? And, a lot of things in the financial world, there are really good rules of thumb that you can lean on, and this is not one of them. So I'm going to give you some of the details about long-term care insurance, and hopefully that will help inform your decision. At the very end, I'm going to walk you through a tool that will help you kind of solidify all of these items as you're doing your own research and planning. Now, as with other meetings, my preference is by far to be on site, in front of you, engaging with you. And I can't do that now. I'm going to try to engage you remotely. I'm going to do that through Poll Everywhere software. If you can get to a browser without leaving this meeting, please go to www.pollev.com. And once you get there, type in my name, Timothy Shirk, 857, into the meeting box. Once you're there, anytime an active question is up on the screen, you can type in your answer and it will be included with everybody else's in an anonymous fashion. If you'd prefer to join by text, text my name, Timothy Shirk, 857 to 22333. Once you do that, you'll be linked to the meeting. Then anytime I have a question up on the slide screen, you can text in your answer. All right, so let's give this a try just for fun. What's the most likely headline for the next 12 months? The Lombardi Trophy comes back to Titletown. The Brewers return to 1982 swagger and Bernie celebrates pennant. Giannis lifts the Larry O'Brien Trophy. USA on top of the medal count in Tokyo. Or the monsters of the Midway reign once again. What's the most likely headline for the next 12 months? Very good. It looks like we're figuring it out. Kind of disappointed more of you aren't positive on the Green Bay's future. I'm guessing we'll get a different answer after early July when we know whether or not we'll still have Aaron Rodgers under center. Hopefully that would be able to change some of the fortunes. So it looks like we're all getting it. Yeah, it looks really good for the Bucks. I hope that could happen. That would be really good for Milwaukee. All right, so that's how it's done. All right, so what are we going to cover? We're going to cover what happens when you need long-term care. What is long-term care insurance? So what's the care? What's the insurance? Do I need long-term care insurance? What should I look for when I'm shopping? And what should I expect to pay? That's the kind of the skeletal structure for today. So let's start with a question. What % of Americans will require long-term care services? How many of us are going to need it? 17, 23, 39, 46, or 53% of us? What do you think? Okay, pretty widely split. The answer is actually 53%. See if I can show that correct answer. There we are, 53%. Now, does that mean that 53% of us need long-term care? Maybe, maybe not. The next question is, what percentage of Americans will spend more than $100,000 for long-term care services? 17, 23, 39, 46, or 53. So 53% of us are going to need long-term care. How much of us are going to spend more than $100,000 for long-term care services? All right, and the answer is 17%. Okay, so this is important. A lot of us are going to need long-term care services. Long-term care services could include rehabilitative stays, right? I fell and broke a hip. We're going to talk about that. Fell and broke a hip. So I went to the hospital, got patched up, and then had to stay between the hospital and going home. I had to stay in a long-term care facility, assisted living facility, until I was able to function again. That may not total up to $100,000. So the point here is that a lot of us are going to need it. We should all consider it, but that doesn't mean it's necessary for everybody. So we do need to think about our situation, think about our health, think about our finances. We'll talk a little bit about that as to whether or not we want to purchase long-term care insurance and how much we need. So what happens when you need long-term care? Okay, we're going to talk about what long-term care is in just a moment. But you need long-term care. Well, Medicare may cover some long-term care. It may cover up to 100 days of rehab if it follows hospitalization. Okay, first 20 days, 100% covered. From day 21 to day 100, there's a copay of $176 per day. And if you do have Medicare supplemental insurance, Medigap, this copay generally is covered by insurance. But now, remember, think of this not so much as long-term care as rehabilitation care. So again, I broke my hip, went to the doctor, had the surgery, couldn't go home yet because I couldn't do all the daily functions. So I went to the assisted living home for a couple weeks or a month or whatever it is so that I could get well enough to then go home. All right. So be clear. That's what Medicare is going to cover. Medicare is not going to cover the the long-term health care for the longer stays that aren't triggered by the hospital visit. The good news, though, is in America, you won't be on the street. You will pay out of pocket for the long-term care that you need, and when your assets are all gone, Medicare will kick in and pay for an approved facility. So something to think about when you're selecting a facility for whatever reason. Even if you had a hospital event, you're older, you have a hospital event, ask the question right away, is that facility covered by Medicaid? Because if for some reason you don't leave the facility, if that facility is covered by Medicaid, they can't kick you out. As long as you got an application in, you will be able to stay there. Otherwise, if you pick a place that's not Medicare approved, or excuse me, Medicaid approved, you could find yourself in a situation where you would have to move. So basically, Medicare is not going to cover it unless it's a hospital event that is turned into rehabilitation. So the next thing is we spend our own assets to pay for our long-term care. What does that require? Well, that involves what we think about as the spend down, right? We're spending down our assets to a point where we now qualify for Medicaid. Again, we're talking about what happens to pay for Medicare if we don't have long-term care insurance. Basically, for a single person, it's $2,000 of assets and a little bit of income. A married couple, it's $4,000 of assets. And if you're married, but one spouse is not applying, so one spouse is, one spouse is not, that remaining spouse can retain half of your assets up to, in Wisconsin, $130,380. All right. Now, this chart, let me just show you this, because this is primarily based on research, you're going to find a lot of links in here. So if you want to find these links, we're going to have the video posted for you. The slide deck will be available, so you can go back and find them. I pulled this chart from the link at the bottom here, medicalplanningassistance.org, medical spin down. In terms of the rules for spousal impoverishment, I'm going to walk through that now. That comes from the link up at the top. Okay, so the spouse that's not getting Medicaid, okay, they can retain $130,000 of assets or half of their assets, and that includes these countable assets. So these are the assets that you'll have to spend down to that point: cash, checking accounts, life insurance policies, savings accounts, CDs, real estate, investments, and stocks and bonds. Okay, that will be recorded, so you'll hear it again. Otherwise, if you go to this website, dhs.wisconsin.gov, Medicaid/spousal-impoverishment.html, they'll have that list. Now, assets that don't count, that aren't included, your home, as long as that spouse that's not covered by Medicaid, if they're living there, the home is not included, or if a dependent relative lives there. They let you keep one vehicle. They let you keep your burial assets, including insurance and some amounts of irrevocable burial trusts and plots. So if you've done that you get to retain household furnishing, clothing, other personal items. All right? So again, if you're looking for that, if the question is, my spouse is going to be going on Medicaid, what can I keep? You will find the details at dhs.wisconsin.gov, Medicaid, spousal impoverishment, HTM. There should be an L on there, I believe, but not certain on that. So you'll find it there. So the next question for the financial advisor is, how can I shield my income and assets from Medicaid so I don't have to go broke? And the answer is, hiding assets by not reporting them is a felony and carries civil and criminal penalties. Don't do it. Okay, that's what I got to say. You just got to stay away from doing it. Now, that doesn't mean you can't prepare. More on that in a moment. It is legal to give away your assets. However, there is a 5-year look back. All right. So if you're going to give away some of these assets to your friends or your family or your kids or whatever, to get them out of your estate, you can. But if you do it within 5 years of applying, you will find yourself potentially not qualifying. So, and this goes for sales of less than market value. So if you sell your $300,000 home to your kids for $100,000, that's actually a $200,000 gift. And so if you do that and they look back 5 years and see you did that in the last 5 years, it's potential they can say, okay, you got to spend down your own assets $2,000 more before you qualify. So there is that clawback for the purpose of eligibility. So just be really careful with that. Now, there are some strategies you can find for qualifying for Medicare. We're going to talk about one related to long-term care and participation type of plans. But if you want, more strategies, talk to an elder care attorney. That way, you know that what you're doing, they can help you make sure you're staying inside of the law. Won't find yourself in a situation where they're going to claw back some of that. You might lose some eligibility. All right, now there is something Wisconsin. It's actually mandated. Wisconsin has an estate recovery program. What that is, the estate recovery program seeks repayment of costs of long-term care services provide for folks on Medicaid, Badger Care, et cetera. It's made from estates. So you pass away, and they'll look at your estate, and they'll go and claw back some of the expenses that they paid. It's from non-probate properties. It's from liens filed on homes. It's made after the assets of the member have been accounted for, so the estate's being settled, and there are other higher priority expenses, but they can actually come after your estate. So again, good reason to talk to an elder care attorney if you want to try to prepare in advance for that. Now, the other thing you can do is you can buy long-term care insurance. What is long-term care insurance? Basically, long-term care insurance is nursing home or assisted living insurance. That's really oversimplified, but let's break it down. It's insurance that pays for care, long-term care. That care is related to expenses you have to pay because you can no longer do certain things for yourself. Everyone needs to bathe. You need to transfer from bed to a chair. You need to clothe yourself. You need to eat. At some point, there's going to be 1, 2, or 3 of these things that you're no longer going to be able to do. At that point, you need assistance. It might be you live in a facility where there's someone there that can help you do those things. It might be that you hire someone to come home to your home and help you do those things. Maybe come home and help you bathe. Maybe come at dinner time and feed you, that kind of thing. And you got to pay for that service. It's long term. So again, this is not the rehabilitative thing. It's the because of my age and because of my infirmity, I can't do these things. And so we expect it to be for extended period of time. We need to consider, and we will talk today about how long we should plan for and how to think about length of time. It is insurance. It's long-term care insurance. It will include an insurance contract, like any insurance product. And with any insurance product, be it home, health, life, automobile, annuities, long-term care, you want to make sure you read and understand the contract because the terms of the insurance will all be in the contract. There will be the devil will be in the details will be in the contract. And so that'll tell you what the covered amount is, what the premium is, all the options. But all insurances have some things in common. One thing it has in common is the pooling of loss. Essentially, you spread the losses over that are incurred by just a few people over a bunch more people. So we all have homeowners insurance. Very few of us, hopefully very few of us, will see our houses burned down. If my house burned down, it would be really expensive to build a new one and replace all the items in it. So what I do, instead of just trying to be prepared for rebuilding my house, I buy homeowners insurance so that annual fee, which is less than what it would cost me to replace my house, I pay that, that's the average loss, okay, against the chance that my house is going to burn down. Now, when someone's house does burn down, they don't pay the whole cost to rebuild the house. The insurance company does. We all pay the average cost each year, so that cost is spread out over a pool of people that are insured. Same thing happens here. long-term care insurance may not be used by everybody. Some folks are going to use long-term care, some folks are not. But that risk is being pooled among many, many folks, so it reduces the cost for everybody. Now, the pure risk itself, the chance that I'm going to be on the hook for a lot of expenses due to long-term care, is transferred from me to the insurance company. The insurance company is in a better financial position to pay for that potential loss than I am. Like all insurance, you want to make sure you buy the right amount, but you don't buy too much. In the case of long-term care insurance, it's highly customizable. So it's really hard to come up with what the cost will be. It will vary dramatically. In a couple of slides from now, I'll show you some ways to kind of get some estimates, some targets. Okay, I'll open it up for questions at this point, Terry, if there are any. Still a little bit early in the presentation, though. Any questions come through at this point?
Thanks, Tim. We do have a couple. One of the questions is related to jewelry. Is jewelry included in your assets? In other words, like a wedding ring or things along those lines?
Let's see here. I think that would be a clothing and other personal item. So I would think it is not, but I'm going to ask you if we can defer that question and let me go and find it. I don't think they're going to take the wedding ring off your finger. If you have if you have a collection of baseball cards, where it's more of an asset, so let me just see. And again, I don't swim in this every day like I do retirement plans and whatnot. So let me see what I can come up with there, and
Okay.
I'll give that to you, Terry. What's the next one?
The other question, we only have two. Oh, there's more coming in. But what about dollars received after you're approved for Medicaid? Like if you receive some funds some way, I don't know, you win the lottery.
So you're
Put on
already
hold for that.
approved and you get $100,000. Does that disqualify you? I did not think to look that up. I assume that you would have to spin that down, but I don't know. So I'm going to look that one up as well.
Okay.
This presentation will be better after I have all your questions.
We're all
All
learning
right.
as we go, right?
Yeah.
And one other question I'll throw out now, and then we'll save the remaining for later, is will creating a revocable or non-revocable trust protect my assets?
Okay, so this is definitely a question I'm going to direct you to a lawyer for. My understanding is if it's revocable, I'm still in control. And so my understanding would be that would not get it out of my estate. I would assume that is still in play. It would have to be a completed gift, and an irrevocable trust is a completed gift. A revocable one is not. So my assumption is it would have to be revocable, but I'm definitely going to kick you toward an elder care attorney for that one.
And we did have a session on estate planning from an attorney, and that was held last week, I believe. I would say you could view the recording on that. He talked about irrevocable and revocable trust, non-revocable, and revocable, and he did go into a little bit of that. You could even just kind of forward a little bit to that piece of the presentation. We have those posted on the Financial Wellness website. If you need that, just email me. I can send you the link real quick and you can watch that. And then we'll save the other questions that I have so far for later.
Okay, and maybe they might be answered because we got a lot more material coming. Okay, true and false. Medicare is going to cover a portion of your long-term care. Is that true or false? Already talked about this a little bit, right? Medicare will cover a rehabilitative stay, right? But it will not cover long-term care. So I just want to, it's a true false. So it's supposed to be black and white, a little bit gray there. Medicare is only for the short-term rehabilitative. So if you get old and get infirm and don't have an injury that puts you in the hospital, Medicare is not going to cover it. All right. If you get, if you have cognitive lapse and you don't end up in the hospital first, Medicare is not going to cover it. So, you might get some coverage for some time spent in an assisted living facility, but it will be only as a result of rehabilitation from injury or surgery. So, what triggers long-term care coverage? Okay, I've got a long-term care policy against the chance I'm going to need to get long-term care. When does the insurance company say, okay, we'll start covering your long-term care? This will be something that is defined in the contract, so you're going to want to make sure that you look carefully at the contract. Generally, it's when you need assistance with a certain number of activities of daily living, ADL. Typically, it's 2. But the classic ones are eating, bathing, dressing, transferring, so going from the bed to the chair, etc., from the chair to the table, using the restroom, or continence. Now, these are spelled out specifically in the long-term care contract. Make sure you know what triggers are covered. Some policies will exclude some. Some of the older ones exclude bathing. So if you're unable to bathe, you might need to pay someone to come in on your own and not get reimbursed for it, or a family member or something like that. Another one is severe cognitive impairment. If you can still do those 6 things, but you have severe cognitive impairment, and this typically requires a doctor's verification. This would be the Alzheimer's kind of thing. That would trigger the long-term care as well. Now, medical necessity. There are some healthcare providers or some long-term care providers that will cover care that a medical provider says is necessary. So you don't trigger enough of those 6 things. You don't have severe cognitive impairment, but a doctor says you need this care. They will, some policies will cover that. Now, that is a loosening of the policy. That makes it easier to get the coverage to start. The pro there is, the positive side is it's more flexible. You can get care sooner. The con is, because it's got an easier trigger, it's typically going to be more used, and as a result, it's going to be more expensive. So with these insurance policies, the more features that are positive, generally speaking, the more expensive they'll be. In this case, if medical necessity is an option, so not one of the triggers, not severe cognitive impairment, then it likely will be more expensive. Okay, so I've got 2 triggers or 3 triggers, whatever's required by my long-term care. So, and the doctor says, yep, he needs those. So now, when does my coverage begin? Well, it starts with an elimination period. Elimination period is a certain number of days before the policy begins to pay for care. This is very much like a deductible for medical or car insurance. You know, if I get in an accident and I've got a $500 deductible, I pay $500 before the insurance kicks in. Same thing happens here with long-term care, except it is a number of days. Now, if you think about it, the longer the elimination period, the lower the cost, right? If I choose a 90-day elimination period, the insurance company is going to pay for fewer days than if I have a 30-day elimination period. As a result, it's going to be less expensive premiums. But you will have, so you can choose the longer elimination period, but you're going to have to be ready to pay for those 90 days. So if you have a strong cash position, you got a good emergency fund, you've got assets that you can use, but you just want to protect yourself against the really long-term depletion of my assets, you can do it for less cost if you have a higher elimination period. Do check and understand if it's cumulative versus consecutive. Consecutive would be you've got to have 60 days of care in a row, consecutive days, before it kicks in. The cumulative would be you have to have 60 days of care within 6 months. And again, the cumulative is more beneficial to you than the consecutive, so we'd expect the cumulative to be more expensive. That's the elimination period. Just be ready for that. Now, what is the average length of a nursing home stay? Is it 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, or 4 years? How long typically are our nursing home stays? And this is important because we're going to be thinking of features related to not only how much is paid for, but also how long the coverage lasts. All right, pretty even mix though. 4 years is the hands-on favorite. The answer actually is, good for those of you that knew it, 3 years. Average length of stay is 3 years for long-term care. And you'll find that in Financial Fitness Classroom. This website, I'll just show it to you. If you want more details about this, you can go to that website, and there's a tutorial that you can go through, including a quiz you start with, see what you know, then go through the tutorial and the quiz you end with. That's where I pulled that information. All right. So how much is covered? Okay. Question number one is the daily benefit. This is the maximum the policy will pay per day. So you might have a $150 day benefit. You might have a $300 daily benefit. How much per day? Keep in mind that inflation is likely to erode the value of the benefit. So if you're 50 years old today and you're buying this policy and you have a $100 maximum per day, 20 years from now, that $100 is going to buy much less care than it does today. So if you're buying when you're younger, you probably want to have inflation adjustment. We think that is a good thing to do, have inflation adjustment. Now, we also think your premium dollar is better spent on the daily benefit amount rather than the length of stay. Okay, the average length of stay is about 3 years. The benefit period is simply a multiplier of the daily benefit by the amount of time. So in this case, if you got a $100 daily benefit, you got a 3-year benefit period. 3 years is 1,095 days times $100 per day, $109,500. That would be your benefit. Now, any sum that's unused in the benefit period remains available. So in the 3-year period, if you only used, because you didn't hit your daily benefit, if you only used $100,000, you still have $9,500 of benefit available. So I'd much rather see a higher daily benefit and a shorter time frame, because you're not going to, that higher daily benefit is not going to be wasted. Okay, much rather see a fully funded 3 years than an underfunded longer time. Any sum unused will remain available, so that's why we think larger benefit amount is better than longer benefit period. All right, so what type of care is covered? This is going to be important when you're looking at the long-term care. There are 3 types of plans that you might have sold in Wisconsin. There is the basic long-term care insurance policy. This policy covers both institutional care, so I'm at a nursing home or I'm at a facility, and it also includes community care, home health care, other community-based services. So there's 2 different pieces. If I go to a facility or if I have someone come into my home, all right? In Wisconsin, if you're going to advertise as a long-term care insurance policy, you have to cover both, all right? Legally, to say that you're long-term care insurance, you have to cover both. Now, you can buy just nursing home insurance policy. It doesn't cover the home health care or the community side. It only covers my time in a facility, okay? A little less expensive. And, you know, some folks buy that because it's less expensive and they expect that they're going to they may need like a catastrophic nursing home care. Otherwise, they'll do it with family and friends helping them out. The third option is just the home health care and not the facility-based. Community, so the home health care, community care. These policies, our preference would be that you have both. It is a good idea to have that home care available. Some folks do institutional care because it's going to be cheaper. But generally speaking, it's less expensive to get care at home, and most people prefer to be home to get care. So we think it's a better option to have both home and facility. And obviously that's going to cost you a little bit more, but most folks find themselves wanting to stay at home longer. So You can get in it cheaper if it's just a facility, but that home option is nice. There are some caregiver restrictions, some insurance contracts. Again, look at the contract. Will require that the provider has a certain registration. They're an RN. They're a licensed practical nurse. They won't let aides. They won't let aides work. Others require that whoever the service provider is hired through a Medicare certified home health care agency or provider. So we'll pay for it, but it's got to be through a Medicare certified. That might be important depending on where you live. If you live in rural Wisconsin and you don't have a close medical certified home health care agency provider, then you might not be able to get service where you live. So know your area, what available services are there, and will the policy cover it? This would be a good reason to use a good independent insurance agent because they can help you with questions like this. All right, so might be a good reason to go to an independent insurance agent. Then there's two ways that can pay for this care. One type of coverage is reimbursement. I had $109 of healthcare services today, so they will pay me $109. They will reimburse me for the cost. A much more flexible option is what's called indemnity. Indemnity is, hey, your limit is $300 a day. You're in long-term care, so we're going to send you $300. We're not going to ask you how you spent it. We're just going to indemnify you. It's more flexible, all right? So those are all options you want to look at and select when you're shopping for long-term care insurance. Okay, so true or false? If you end up on Medicaid, okay, you pay months and years and years and years of long-term care premiums, and then you end up taking getting on long-term care, getting all of your benefits paid out, and now you end up spending down all your assets, so you're covered by Medicaid. Did you waste all those premiums? And it's a good answer. The answer is false. A couple ways paying for those premiums will benefit you. One, and this is important, you might have 5 different long-term care facilities in your area, in your neighborhood. You're in Metro Milwaukee, there's a whole bunch of them. You may not be able to afford the one you want to go to, okay? As you're spending down your assets, you'd really like to be at that one, but you can't afford it, so you got to go to this one. By having a long-term care insurance, you can use your long-term care insurance to go to that one, and as long as that one that you wanted to go to, as long as it is a Medicaid-covered location, when you transfer over to Medicaid and Medicaid is now paying, you won't get kicked out. You can stay there, all right? Otherwise, if you didn't have that long-term care and you couldn't afford to go to that facility, you're stuck at the one that you could afford. So that's one way. The other is through a partnership plan. We'll talk about those next. So you bought long-term care insurance and you went into long-term care services and you had an elimination period where you paid on your own, 60 days, 30 days, 90 days, whatever it was. Long-term care kicks in and they pay for your benefit period. Your benefit period's up. You've had all of your benefits. Now what happens? You reach your benefit limit. Now you use your assets, your savings, the things that you own. You draw down your own assets to pay for continued care. And then when your assets are depleted, Medicaid will take over, okay? Here is where you don't have the waste. Number one, you got into a facility you wanted to get into. Number two, most states have partnership plans, okay? Partnership plan says if you have long-term care, we will allow you to retain assets totaling the value of that long-term care. So if you have long-term care for $150,000 and you burn all that $150,000 in long-term care, you get to keep not only the minimum, but you get to keep an additional $150,000. So this can be a part of a way to protect some of the assets for if you're going to leave them, for example, to kids. Be careful. Hiding assets for Medicare is a felony. There is a 5-year look back, so make sure that you're upfront and open about your assets. When Medicare applies, then you can retain more of your assets if you're in the partnership program. One thing I would just stress again here, make sure as you select the location you're going to go into, you want to make sure you're going into a Medicaid, a facility that accepts Medicaid. Otherwise, if you don't, you'll have to move from one facility to a Medicare, a Medicaid accepted facility. So just make sure you do that. So use that partnership program. The partnership program does require certain things of your contract. It has to have a certain amount of inflation adjustment, has a certain amount of coverage, has a certain amount of benefit time, state-by-state question. Can it transfer from state to state? Some states have some states honor reciprocity, so you have to look at which state you're going to retire at to know whether or not Wisconsin's partnership program will be honored by Florida, for example. And again, another reason to use an independent agent to help you with those answers. Okay, so that's kind of the structure of how long-term care looks. For time's sake, Terry, I'm going to keep driving through, and then we can pick up questions that I may have missed at the end. Do I need long-term care insurance? Well, ask a couple of questions. Can you afford to pay for long-term care yourself? If you can, then you don't need it. Can you save for long-term care costs? So maybe you're not where you are now, but can you put a plan together to save enough for that? If you can, then you don't need it. And then there are some other factors, so let's kind of dive into those. First of all, can you afford to pay for long-term care now, or can you save for long-term care? And here's where what we want to do is we want to project your total cost. So we're going to research the cost of long-term care in your area. We're going to determine a benefit period, maybe it's 3 years, and we're going to adjust for inflation. Now what I want to do, got to come out of my laser pointer here. I want to actually go to this website. There we go. So this is Genworth. This is they sell insurance, so we got to be kind of cautious. They won't be conflict free. They won't be objective, but they've got a really nice calculator. And I just wanted to show you this because question number one is, can I afford long-term care? Because you may have assets enough to pay for it yourself. So you can select what type of expense, hourly, daily, monthly, or annual. I'm going to leave it on monthly. And then they've got an interactive map that's supposed to pop up here. There we go. So I can select Wisconsin. So I'm going to select Wisconsin. Median cost in Wisconsin, I'm just going to look at assisted living facility. Monthly cost for assisted living facility in Milwaukee is in Wisconsin is $4,400. Let's see, that is the state. Let's zoom into Milwaukee. If I go to the Milwaukee area, see if that changes, $5,073. All right. So if you're going to retire somewhere up north, like in the Wausau area, $4,100. If you're going to be over in the La Crosse area, $3,800. All right. So I'm going to assume Milwaukee because I want to be close to my grandkids. See if I can find it here. Milwaukee area. All right, $5,073. Now, I'm 47 years old, so I won't be probably thinking about this until maybe my 70s is when I'm expecting that might happen. More on that in a minute. So that might be, 20 years down the road. So I'm going to put that slider in there at 23 years. That same cost today, $5,073, might be $10,012 with inflation, and I can select an inflation range here. So that's why we say you definitely want to look at inflation adjustments. Let me see if I can go back to there we are. So determine if your current financial plan will include sufficient assets to do that. So you multiply the $10,000 times the number of days you want to have covered. Maybe it's typically about 3 years or so. So you do that math. And do you have the, whatever it is, $400,000 in your planning tool to pay for that, to cover that. If you don't, the second question is, can I save up for that? So I go to my financial advisor and I talk through, okay, if I need an additional $350,000, $400,000 for long-term care, how much do I need to save now, and how much of a rate of return do I need in order to get that? Okay, so can you save for it? Can you pay for it? All right. And talk to your financial advisor about that. Now, the other factor that will play into whether or not you need it, if you can pay for it, you don't need it. If you can save up, that would be better, because then if you don't need it, you still have the assets. Other factors might be legacy planning. You might say, you know what, I want to leave each of my kids with $300,000, with $100,000. I've got 3 kids, so I need $300,000 in my estate plan. I might get long-term care with a benefit of $300,000. So even if I have to spend everything down, I can still leave that for my kids. Think about flexibility of care. You may be able to afford something that's lower end in your area, but by getting some insurance, you might offset some of the costs. They might not pay for all of it, but you might be able to get into a higher end service, a better product. And finally, family history is going to come in here. If you have a history of all the males in your family having cognitive disorder starting at 75 years old, much more likely to have. And what's their experience? Do they have it for 10 years and 15 years? If you have it for a longer period of time, that might be motivation to purchase long-term care. All right, this is from Dave Ramsey. What percentage of claims are filed after 70 years old? 55% A, 62% B, 75% C, 89% D, 95% E. So the question here is, when typically are these claims filed? So when are you actually using the long-term care benefit? Okay, most folks are saying 89% or 75%. The survey says, that dates me a little bit, 95%. 95%. So this is typically something that happens when you're a little bit older, generally around 70s when these start kicking in. So that'll have an impact on our decision on when we actually start buying this. Do we buy it at 50? Do we buy it at 60? More on that in a little bit. What to consider when shopping? Definitely check out the strength of the provider, the insurance company that's selling this to you. And some of the ratings organizations are there: AM Best Financial Strength Ratings, Moody's Investor Services, Fitch Investor Services. Why is this so important? When it first rolled out in the early 1990s, long-term care looked like it was going to be this lucrative product, and so all the insurance companies jumped in, only to find out that it's actually hard to turn a profit on long-term care. And as a result, a lot of them left the market, a lot of them got purchased by bigger companies, and a lot of them raised premiums on policies that are in force. And this is important. They can raise your premium. The premium is not locked in. That is a possibility. So make sure you look into the contract. More on that in a little bit. So as a result, just be careful to look at the strength of the provider, find out how often they have raised their rates over the last 10 years. More on that in a moment. And make sure you go with a strong provider. Here's where you got to be careful. You may be using an independent agent. Make sure they're not shopping just by fee alone. You might get a cheaper policy, but in an organization that may not be as strong, that might be a hook, and you might find that 5 years from now, the cost is much higher. So be careful for that. Focus on benefit dollars, daily benefit dollar, as opposed to an inflation rather than length of stay. So I want a higher daily benefit, and I want inflation. Shorter but higher benefits better. Don't overshoot. If you're stretching to pay your premiums now, they might bump up. If they do, your policy could lapse. Okay, so make sure you're comfortable that you're going to be able to continue paying for this premium. Understand the provider can raise the price. Question of 50 or 60 years old. If you start at 50 years old, you're going to pay a lower premium, but you're going to write more checks, right? Start later means a higher premium, but fewer checks. Typically, I like starting later because most of these events are going to be after you're 70. Just consider your family history. If you have early onset of things like dementia, that may be a reason to purchase earlier. But generally speaking, I lean towards later. So what should you expect to pay? All right, so I'm going to take you to another link here. Mutual of Omaha, they also will sell. So again, they're not going to be entirely conflict-free, but they've got a really great calculator that'll do two things for you. All right. The first thing is they'll help you figure out the cost of care. Here's another calculator. I'm going to be in Wisconsin. 23 years from now, I'm going to be 70 years old, and I'm going to use a 3% inflation rate. I'm going to update the chart. If I am in an assisted living facility, the average cost today is $4,678 per month. Projected cost in 2043 is $9,233. All right, so that's a good idea based on where you're going to live, how much the cost will be. So when I'm thinking about how much should I expect, here's the calculator you can go to and check. Now, if you go down a little bit further, you can estimate the cost. Okay, so here is where we can find out, well, how much is it going to cost me to buy insurance? Up above was how much is long-term care going to cost? How much is the insurance going to cost? Well, I am married. I am a male. And I am currently 47, okay, and I live in 53151. Okay, my wife, I'm going to say, is not interested for now, just to compare apples to apples, and I want 3,100. So I know it's going to cost me more than that, but I think between my savings and my assets and that 3,100, I'm going to be able to get into the facility I want to get into. I'm going to calculate the results, and here are some policy estimates. $2,100 of benefits, 71. 3,100 is 105. 4,100 is 139. So 105. Now, if I don't buy at 47, if I buy at 60, how will that change? Calculate the results. Instead of about $100, now I'm looking at about $145. Okay, because I'm older, don't have as much time to pay in. The insurance company's got to have a higher rate for me. All right, so that is where you can find a calculator. Look, now this next piece, this next link, I'm not going to actually go there. I've actually copied some stats from that next link. Average long-term care insurance rates for someone who's age 55. A male is $1,700 per year. Female is $2,600 a year. If you're doing it as a couple, there's a little bit of savings there, $3,050 combined. So if you want some numbers in terms of what average is, what to plan for, that would be long-term care rates for someone who's 55, okay? So is that something that fits into your cash flow? Is that something that you can fit into your financial plan? And this is for $164,000 benefit, daily benefit of $150 for 3 years, and 3% compound interest. Now, interesting, they then go on and say, what's the lowest out there? All right, and the lowest is for a male is 1,876. Now, why is it higher than 1,700? This on this side of the page, they're comparing the top 5 policies. All right, so these are the top 5 sellers. Of the top 5 sellers, about 1,800 is the cheapest. So this over here is going to include some policies from some sellers you don't want to use. All right, again, another reason to use an independent agent to look around for you, be able to do some due diligence. So you can see, what's my situation? Male, it's going to be between 1,876 and 3,000, lowest to highest. An independent agent is likely to be able to compare costs a little bit, maybe get you something a little bit cheaper, but make sure you still have the features that you need. Now, this last tool, this is the payoff tool, I think. This is from the OCI.wi.gov. This is a website I would encourage you to go to. If you're in the PDF, I encourage you to download. If you're considering long-term care, Commissioner of Insurance for Wisconsin, every state's got one of these. These are the folks that govern how insurance is done in our state. And this gives you all sorts of information related to some of the stuff I talked about today. Just highlight some of them. This will answer some of the questions you came here to ask. Does Medicare cover long-term care? You should not count on it because it's only limited and for rehabilitation. Can my premiums be increased? Yes, it can. Can the insurance company cancel my long-term policy? No, they can't. However, even though it's renewable for life, they can increase the premiums so they can price you out of it. All right. Pre-existing conditions must be covered, but there may be a waiting period. So if you have a pre-existing condition, you might have to wait for up to 6 months. Alzheimer's, other dementias are required to be covered, but they are not. The insurance company is not required to accept your application if you already have it. So if you wait until you have it, it might be too late. Elimination period. So it'll give you all sorts of information similar to what I gave you today. Okay. Now I want to go down to, it's about page 23, 24. This is a long-term care insurance checklist. This is something that I would expect you to fill out with your insurance agent. It's going to have contact information for the agent, and it's going to give you things like daily benefit, length of benefits, limitation for each of the different features. All right. It's going to tell you what kind of elimination periods. You're going to have them fill in what the elimination period is. These are the things that you want to ask when you're shopping. Is there a non-forfeiture benefit? Is there an inflation benefit? What are the costs? This long-term care and insurance personal worksheet is, I think, golden. This is, my understanding, state law requires the insurance company to ask you to complete this worksheet. The purpose here is for them to be able to be certain that what they're selling you is suitable to you. All right. So this document's going to have the cost. They're going to have to put the cost per month or per year or a single time. You can pay for a single one-time payment. Is it non-cancelable or guaranteed renewable? And they have to put in here, the company cannot raise your rates on this policy, or the company has the right to increase the premiums on this policy, so that you know, is this something that could be more expensive? Rate increase history. Company sold long-term care since what year? 1992, 93, since it was started? Lots of experience. 2017, be careful, right? The company has not raised its rates in the last 10 years, or the company has raised its rates in the last 10 years. So this is information you're going to want to know. How are you going to pay? Is it just through income? If so, what happens when you're not working anymore, right? Is the policy going to lapse? How much is your income? Do you expect it to increase, decrease? Again, these are things that you're going to be thinking about when you're thinking about whether or not to buy it. Is it inflation protected? If not, have you considered how you'll make up the difference in cost? Okay, and then they'll have to insert here the national average this year was a certain amount. All right, so again, this is to help you just make sure you're addressing all the questions. Elimination period, how many days is it going to be? How much cost will that be? And how are you going to come up with that elimination period? All right, questions related to your savings and investments, and are they going to go up and down? So this is a document that when you're looking for insurance, considering insurance, you're going to walk through this. It's going to help you make sure you capture all the things you need to think about, like inflation protection and elimination periods and the like. All right. Tim got long-winded. I've got some links in here. They will be in the slide deck that's made available. They will also be in the recording. And that is all about long-term care. Terry, I'm able to stick around if other folks are able to stick around.
We'll finish up. We don't have too many more questions. We've covered most of them. One of the additional we had is regarding estate recovery, the estate recovery program. Does a title on death prevent your home from going to the state versus your children if Medicare is utilized for long-term care?
Okay, so you've got it transfer on death.
Yep.
Let me just go back to that slide because I've got some notes on that slide. Hang on just a moment. Because I believe it's let me see here. Let's see.
In the estate recovery program, you mentioned that they may try and come back and scratch at you for items. So I think they're trying to protect that particular asset.
Yeah, so that is going to be definitely going to direct that to an elder care attorney, but I want to say, here it is. It is made to Certain non-probate property. So recovery is made from estates of surviving spouses, and from certain non-probate properties. So what we'd have to do, you have to go, because that transfer on death would be non-probate, right? That's one way to get out around probate. So I don't know any further than that. So that is something I'm definitely going to have to give to an elder care attorney.
Okay. And I'd rather us be safe than sorry anyway. Does Medicare cover hospice care?
Does Medicare cover hospice care? I don't know. I don't
know. I'm trying to think of the Medicare presentation we had. That was our second presentation. And I don't recall if he talked about hospice care. It was more like rehab facility, like you mentioned, right after a hospitalization. So I'm wondering, maybe we can follow up on that
And
one.
let me take a look, and I can see it probably will be pretty easy to see. The Medicare website's got some really good stuff on it. So
Yes, they
I'll give
do.
that answer to Terry. You can forward
Yes,
that on.
they do. Okay. And then a couple of comments about sharing the slide deck, sharing the recordings. We will definitely do that. So you will have all of the links that Tim had in the presentation. And somebody did indicate in here, but again, we'll confirm Medicare covers the medical part of hospice care, not the facility. So, you know, I don't know that. I don't want to give that information to everybody and assume. Let's just validate that. And then you did kind of talk about when purchasing, you know, you mentioned age 50 versus age 60 and touched on those calculations. Comment was years ago, I saw Susie Orman say she's done the research and ran the numbers, and that the optimal time to purchase long-term care is at age 50. Have you heard that?
I'm not privy to that information from Susie Orman. I'd be interested in seeing that. But if it was from years ago, understand that things have changed dramatically in the long-term care. Back in the 90s, long-term care looked a lot different than it does now. So I would look at when you're, and you know, I would direct you to Dave Ramsey, you know, and he would lean toward, let's do it later, because you're not likely to have an event until you're 70, you know. So look at your family health, and if folks are starting to need this coverage earlier than 70, then yeah, start earlier, because you don't want to start after it's happened. But for most folks, it's after 70. So, and that might just be opinion. It might be a change in the long-term care environment, and it might actually just be opinion, and you might have to pick who you like better, Susie or Dave.
Right. They both have good advice.
They do.
And as you mentioned, things change with time. So I think I've captured all of the questions in the Q&A in the chat. Celeste, did you see any other ones that I might have missed by chance? I think I've got them all, but.
You know, the one other thing that we used to hear about a lot, we used to hear about a donut, right? So if you have a very small amount of assets, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to put a whole lot of money into an insurance, a long-term care insurance, when you don't have a lot of assets to protect. And then on the other side, you know, if you've got, you know, a very sizable estate, and you're likely to be able to pay the 100, 150, 200, 250, $300,000 and still have a lot of assets remaining, it may not make a lot of sense to use long-term care. Most of us are probably in that hole in the middle, you know, where, you know, I've got enough assets that I want to protect them, but I don't have so much that I can just outright pay for them. So I would say the first thing you do in that environment, if you're kind of in that middle, is say, can I save? If I'm 40 years old and starting to think about this, can I talk to my financial advisor and say, what would it take for me to save up the benefit payment I would otherwise pay insurance for? If my benefit is going to be $300,000, you know, daily benefit over a benefit period of time, instead of paying for insurance for that $300,000, how about if I save up for that $300,000. How much am I going to have to save? What kind of rate of return am I going to have to get? So let's think on the positive side first. And if we come to the point where we don't think that'll happen, then let's flip over and look at insurance.
Okay, I think we've covered most of it. I know we're over time here, so if you have additional questions, you can obviously email me. You can email wellness@mcw.edu. Tim gave you his contact information. Celeste also works at MCW and in the retirement and 403B area. She can look into further information as well. I thank you all for joining us this afternoon. And I will be sending out the recording and the slide deck to everyone that attended today, just for their reference as well. So thanks so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.